Hello, wonderful world of YouTube, it's Alex. Today, I am at the David Warther Museum in Sugarcreek, Ohio. David Warther is a man born in 1956, and he is known for his intricate ship carvings. His first carving, made at just age 6, was of a Viking ship. This would go on to spark a passion lasting over 50 years. The desire to make the ship stemmed from the interest in the beauty each ship has. After developing his own technique to make string from ivory at the age of 13, he would go on to discover the signature piece of his artworks. What better way to explain this technique than to hear it from David Warther himself?
This is how I go about making ivory string. I cut strips of ivory on a bandsaw, so these strips are square. They're usually about this length. The block of steel is a block of steel with grooves in it. Those grooves vary from being very large grooves all the way around to being very tiny grooves. So I clamp this in a vise. I'm able to file over top the groove with a file and rotate the ivory with my other hand. And once I get it rounded, then I start indexing the ivory into smaller and smaller grooves, and I'm feeding more material through as I do this. When I get the strings smaller, then I turn the block over and I end up in these very tiny grooves. This is where I take sandpaper on a stick, and I actually just end up sweeping the ivory gently with sandpaper as I turn it, and I finally end up with a little thread of ivory. This is your typical ivory string, and it's just 7/1000ths of an inch in diameter. And so in the end, I'm just very gently sweeping the ivory with sandpaper. Then I take the ivory string to the buffing wheel over here, and as the wheel spins, I'm able to run my string between my finger and the wheel. I'm able to develop a high polish on the ivory string. So that is how a rigging line for one of my ships is made. It's made in the grooves with hand tools. When I was wee little, this was home for me. I didn't get into ivory when I was 20. I simply did not get out of ivory from when I was 4 or 5. This is what I grew up with. These were the resources in our family. This was home to me. But my dad did not scrimshaw, neither did my grandpa. So scrimshaw was in when I was wee little. This was home for me. I didn't get into ivory when I was 20. I simply did not get out of ivory from when I was 4 or 5. This is what I grew up with. These were the resources in our family. This was home to me. But my dad did not scrimshaw, neither did my grandpa. So scrimshaw was in a field very close to our field, but it wasn't in our field. Grew up without it to a certain point. Learned about scrimshaw from a family friend. My mom and dad had very close friends. The friends were husband and wife. They were America's leading scrimshaw artists, originally from Dover, Ohio. They lived their adult lives on Nantucket Island, and they are buried out there. They were very close friends, so we visited them every 3 or 4 years. They visited here regularly, and I grew up meeting Paul and Signe Morris just about every year, all over again. And we were visiting there when I was a kid, when I was about 11 years old, and Mr. Morris showed me the very basics of scrimshaw. And I'll be right back to show you guys how that's done. Mammoth ivory, ancient walrus ivory, and so forth. So, Mr. Morris was just a peach of a guy. He was a huge guy, looked like Santa Claus, big long beard and everything. And he was just a really nice guy. We were visiting there on Nantucket Island. His living room was just filled with 2 families. He had 4 kids, my mom and dad had 6. All these kids are there. Mr. Morris looks across the room at me and he said, you, David, points to me. He says, you're coming with me. We're gonna take you into the studio and show you how we scrimshaw. So as I look back at it, I guess my dad told him that I was the most interested, because out of 6 kids, picked my little fanny out to take me into the workshop and show me how he scrimshawed. We got in the workshop, grabbed a piece of polished ivory, and he looked at me over his glasses. He said, you already know how to polish ivory, don't you? Yes, sir, I do. Okay, you got to get that high gloss. You take a sharp steel needle, you score a line in the highly polished ivory. To get the line straight, you make plastic templates from giant sheets of plastic. You're able to hold a template down, Your needle point can ride the edge of the template and you can get a really nice straight line, or wrapping these templates around the curvature of a whale's tooth or anything, a ship, you can get a curved line or a straight line on a curved surface. So these are handy. Score a line, smear ink over the area, wipe off the excess ink, you've got a black line. Now you can see it, you can do the next line. You do have to ink each line as you go, for the simple reason you cannot see the line. When you take your plastic template away, it's a white line on a white surface. It's completely camouflaged. It's like, well, better ink this guy in so I can see where he's at, so I can measure over and do the next line. And I measure these things over just like you would do a project at home. My rulers are tinier, my magnifiers are bigger, the light's bright, it's right there, measure over, do another line. When all of the lines are done, then I go in to do the gray areas and the black shaded areas. All shading is done by poking dots with the needle point, filling those dots with ink. You learn to gauge these dots. The deeper the dot, the closer they are to one another, the darker that image will be. You can get anything by gauging how you're poking dots. You can get anything from off-white to pitch black. It's all in how you pattern and poke the dots. And that's the scoop.
The family talent of carving has been with the Warther family since the mid-1800s. His great-great-grandparents were cabinet makers and carvers in Switzerland. And of course, his grandfather, Ernest Mooney Warther, was well known for his history of steam engine carvings, also made from ivory and wood. The history of steam carvings would go on to inspire David to make the history of ships. The carvings that David has made are beautiful. He's made 92 of them, and to showcase all of them in a video would be very hard. They're all just so intricately done with the techniques, with the ivory to make the string, and the scoring with the inking. The detail is incredible. You can see throughout some of these, they have the little magnifying glass to look at the finer details closer. And you can just see the detail. It's honestly incredible. And it's one of the most coolest art pieces I've ever seen, because you just don't see that kind of detail in a painting or factory-made models. But something handmade by someone, you can see the finest details and the attention to detail that he has. I should make it very clear that the David Warther Museum sources the ivory legally. All of it dates back to the early 1900s and is legally acquired pre-banned ivory. He follows all guidelines set by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. David's artwork is a beautiful thing. The location, being in rural Ohio, makes for a fine place to have such a collection. His work is incredible, and seeing it in person is something that everyone who appreciates fine art should do. And talking to him about the art was also really cool. The fact he's working on his 93rd piece right now is really cool to see. If you're in the area, I would highly recommend stopping in to see it. So until next time, stay wandering.